Welcome to the Au Jus. I'm your host, Beefloaf. This show is being sponsored by our friends Punky's Pizza and Pasta, located at 2600 South Wallace, my personal favorite eatery in the neighborhood. They have the best selection of pizzas and pastas, as well as sandwiches and salads of any spot in Bridgeport. Currently, they have a terrific Monday Nights Only special. One medium cheese pizza for $12.99. No promo codes, no minimums. Just place the order after 3 p.m. and you get one medium cheese pizza for $12.99. You better hurry up because they're not too far from closing with our late start today. Hit the website, punkyspizza.com, for all your carryout or delivery needs or to cater your next party. You can also call 312-842-2100. The Scarlotta family will take care of you. Punky's Pizza and Pasta. This show is also powered by you, the Loyal 108 supporter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, turn on notifications, and most definitely super chat, because that's how we get paid. It's how we continue to make the content you know and love. Tonight's guest... He's the managing editor at FutureSox.net and the co-host of the Future Sox podcast, along with friend of the show, Ian Eskridge. He's also a Varsity Blues aficionado, James Fox. Welcome back to the Au Jus, my friend.
What's up, man? How's it going? Long time no see.
It is, exactly. It's good seeing you over the weekend a couple times. It was a little more inebriated Saturday night after the show than I was Friday night. But yeah, it was good. A good weekend for Sox fans to get out and be amongst each other. I thought, there are pros and cons about the way Sox Fest Live worked out, and I'm sure there'd be a million opinions between now and the end of the week, but I enjoyed myself there, and then obviously at our show at Reggie's.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. I don't, if they ever get good again, I don't know that they can keep doing it there, but it was cool for right now, for sure.
Yeah, at some point you're going to run out of space, and you won't be able to raise the ticket price high enough to constrain the space. So yeah, but hey, until then, I like that size of a venue because it seemed like if you wanted to get close to a player, take a picture, whatever, you could kind of do it. For the most part, people could do it.
Yeah, one thing I heard that was ridiculous. So there was a lot of people that were complaining about the school buses. I drove in from New Lenox, parked in the lot for free, and got on a bus. That's tremendous.
That's nice, right?
It's a school bus. Who cares?
Dropped at the door?
It's 4 blocks. But people were like, oh, you couldn't get real buses. It's like, what? This is totally fine. I don't have to pay for parking. I'm fine.
Right. Exactly. I've seen some nitpicking out there. I thought it was a pretty decent event for what it was. So I guess we'll see. The public will determine. Now, I want to have a full discussion with you about the White Sox International Scouting Department, and not just you do a lot of reporting on this stuff, but I want opinions too, because I think what we need to do is set a framework for what White Sox fans should be looking forward towards. They've dealt with a desolate international scouting department for years. Many people don't even. The last kind of regular international guy that came up with semi-productive was Yolmer Sanchez. So that, and a lot of people, that's their only frame of reference, and most people would be like, that guy sucks, or even though he had a Gold Glove, just because of his action. But before we get to all that, today Keith Law dropped his top 100 prospects, and he dropped a bomb on Sox Twitter in leaving Colson Montgomery off of his top 100. What do you think about Law and leaving him off, and Law's just process in general?
Yeah. I think it's a little hot takey, but I understand, being soured, on the player. The one thing, I'll give Keith Law credit for, he's seen Colson Montgomery play multiple times, and he's kind of said since the back injury, he's just kind of thought he's looked stiff and not that good. So this isn't the first time that he's said it. A lot of times he overcorrects though too, because he did he really liked Colson Montgomery. He pushed back against the narrative that he was too old. He even thought that he could play shortstop, and I think he goes really hard sometimes in favor of a guy, and then he feels oh shit, I might have been wrong, and then now he's completely off the bandwagon.
Yeah.
So look, I don't know. Pipeline and BA both have him at 39, which
okay.
Maybe split the difference. That honestly might be too high with he was bad last year. And I know I think I'm still okay with that profile because he's still really young and it's the first time he's struggled. But I definitely understand not thinking he's a top 25 prospect in baseball or something. Now, it's a White Sox prospect, so they're obviously convinced at least that he can start his career at shortstop. So he's going to play shortstop.
Right.
I don't understand.
It's coming.
There's some media talk maybe he's a third baseman. Yeah, maybe, but not for 2 years. Minimum.
Say, maybe a couple years down the road if that does happen. You're right.
He's coming up and playing shortstop at some point. I hope it's not opening day, but it might be. But no, and with some of the I love Jim Callis and Baseball America, but they make their own lists, and then they reach out to scouting directors and teams, and they're like, hey, what do you think about this list? Does this make sense? So they like outsource all this stuff, which is why like a lot of the same prospects are on this list and these lists. And you look at a Keith Law list, and boy, is it different usually, right? Like there's, and sometimes he's really like right. He was the first guy that had Fernando Tatis. He was also the first guy that said Nick Madrigal sucks. Like this guy's going to be nothing. His ceiling is like backup, basically, like backup infielder because he just doesn't impact the baseball, and nobody wanted to believe him. So yeah, I mean, the thing that's not great is that his position player evals are usually pretty good. So hopefully he's wrong this time.
Yeah, I was gonna say his list is usually pretty avant-garde, away from the kind of the rest of the list that might be a little more consensus. And for me personally, I like reading the lists that are a little bit out because then I can get a different perspective on it. I'm just ingesting. I don't know enough about it to make a real decision. So seeing some guys step out and say that, and I remember the Magical thing. I had been out on Magical from the beginning. Treasley and I wrote stuff, and we got killed by everyone on Sox Twitter. And we're like, oh, here's someone who agrees with us on Magical. He said he ain't going to be shit. And then that one came true. But I wish there were a couple more of the groups with cachet to go out on a limb sometimes and make a stand on some guy. And I think we all could learn from it.
Well, I don't know if you saw, so me and Ian both, like, Baseball America left Caro off, which is weird because, so I listened to the podcast with Carlos Collazo and Ben Badler. Those guys are both great. So they each had Caro in their personal top 100. So I don't know how many people vote on this, but he was out at, like, that's nuts to me. Like, he's, like, I'm not saying he's top 50, like, but, like, 21-year-old switch hitting catcher that had a 139 WRC plus, like, across Birmingham and Charlotte, like with 17 homers. Like, I mean, that's a top 100 prospect.
A guy who very obviously has good on base skills, even if you don't think he's a catcher.
And he's an okay catcher.
Right.
Like, like catchers suck, like that's what the Kyle Teal thing, right? It's like, well, yeah, he can hit and he plays catcher. So he's good because catchers are terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't even realize. You run down the list, you say, you start running out of catchers that can hit at about the fifth catcher. Like out of the regular guys. I mean, most of these guys absolutely cannot hit. And I did see Keith Law had, I think he had Carroll 53rd or something like that. So he had him fairly high up there, and a glowing review of Edgar Carroll.
Well, I mean, people think like Corey Lee's good because he plays catcher, and he's a big leaguer probably, right?
Yeah, he's a backup. I think he's a backup.
But right, like he's an offensive minded backup. But he's better than like a lot of other teams' catching situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the international. The White Sox recently turned over the international scouting department. They fired Marco Patti. And on my side of the world, Treasy has been begging for that for 5+ years. Mm-hmm. And I know there's people on your side of the world, too, who are pretty hot and heavy for that, too. Let's take a trip down memory lane real quick on the Marco Patti era. The good, the bad, the ugly. What happened, James? Why did he get to stay so long? Why is he gone now?
Well, I mean, it was a Kenny Williams hire for sure. I mean, there was a lot of those things. I mean, Chris Getz took over, and I think a lot of this stuff was lost because, like, everybody was so mad that the hire was Chris Getz. And look, like, I get it. You and I have talked about this on multiple shows. Like, not the hire I would have made, but, he's done a lot of interest. I think Chris Getz would have launched Marco Patti right away, but he was under contract, and Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't operate that way. So, right. God forbid.
He had to pick his fights. Getz had to pick his fights. For the way it looks to me, like he had to pick certain things to do first and things to do later. Yeah. And he's by this time.
Well, so there is I don't really know where the restrictions come in. I don't know if it's but like, look, the White Sox don't play in the Dominican market. They very rarely spend big money on teenagers, and like you're signing these guys at 13, 14 years old, which is the whole thing's creepy and weird, but it's the name of the game, right? So you got to do it. So they're not there. They're not in the Pacific Rim. And they would just hold money for older Cubans every year. And I think part of that was like, Kenny and Rick know the spending proclivities of the man they work for. And they're like, ooh, maybe we could get this guy up to the big leagues like in a year. But like, like it's just such low upside. It's like the one market that you should be able to like finesse other people in, right? And you choose not to. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, they can't play at the top of the market in free agency unless it's for a closer or a catcher, right?
Right.
But you could sign the best Dominican shortstop for $6 million. They just don't. So, I mean, I don't know, like the Marco Patti philosophy, like it started to shift towards pitching, which I'm a fan of and we can get into. Yep. but it's just always so many like players with bloodlines and future first basemen and just power and just yeah, it was a disaster like for a long time.
Yes.
And it's just
It
like the
bore no
recent,
fruit, and every year, like you'd have a ranked prospect or a couple in the top 10 from the group, and it would be, and Sox Twitter would be like, oh, you can't trade that, you can't trade Nor Rivera, you can't get rid of Oscar Colas, you got to hold on to these guys, and everything died on the vine.
well, and like he like deserves credit for Abreu and Robert, right? But like, how much credit?
Right.
Like I mean, you're the high bidder on both guys, and those are big time like Kenny Williams like moves,
Yeah.
and Jerry, and there's nobody like you mentioned Yolmer. I mean, right now, if Lenin Sosa ended up being like a decent player, right? That's their best international signing then of the last decade.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
he might be now, even
Yeah. Oh,
like, and he's not
even without
good.
it. But yeah, like if he went out this season and had a 1.5 WAR season, you'd be like, holy shit, this is like by far
the most
best.
that the most that they've gotten out of the international market in a long time. I mean,
Which
it's
is
like
crazy.
it's like him and Brian Ramos basically right now, and that's it. And everything else is going to be new. So,
And that's nutty when you look at opening day in 2024, 28% of the players in Major League Baseball were from the international markets, the various ones. And so it's insane that you're cutting off that high of a percentage of the group and getting no fruit from it. It's like it's absolutely insane.
and I do think they understand it now based off of some of the things that David Keller has said. But it just takes time. Like going through this, like I wrote my preview and we talked about it on our show. And it's like, I mean, most of the signing class were Marco Patti players because there's
That's
nothing
where
you
you're
can
at.
really, there's nothing you can do because even if you cancel all those deals, there's nobody else to sign because those guys all have deals like with other teams. So I'm curious to see for next year. None of those rumored names are out, but I would imagine there's like one top signing that they probably already have a deal with. And then, you'll have to go out and see for yourself. But yeah, I mean, it does sound like they at least understand that that's a market that they like have to play in. They don't have a choice.
Yeah, they have to get value out of that for sure. And you bring up the new hire. David Keller is the new hire overseeing this as of right now from the Mets. What do we know about him so far?
I mean, I like what he said. I don't know if he knows how to scout players. I mean, because it's like so early. But I mean, he worked for a good organization and he was working in international scouting. He wasn't their director. But it does seem like he's like coming in to like modernize everything, help get the academy built, so if he's like doing something else for the White Sox 2 years from now and they have an international director, I wouldn't be surprised because the way they've talked about his title kind of vaguely, like he's one of Getz's top lieutenants, right?
Right. Yeah.
So then all of a sudden, like he revamps this department, gets it rolling, and then they hire someone and then he just kind of does something else. Like I wouldn't be surprised. But I like how he says like they need to be where the players are, which basically means the Dominican Republic. He talked about like high upside premium athletes, which are expensive in the draft and they're expensive in free agency, and they're not expensive on the international market. No. So, and that
they're more volatile and you got to wait longer for them, but still, they're cheaper.
But you can always like if any of them like play really well in A-ball, you can trade them. Like that's the best currency, right?
Absolutely.
You may think like this guy's not very good, but we're going to trade 2 of them to get something at the deadline. The Sox can't even do that because they don't get guys past Arizona usually before they're cutting them. So yeah, and I will say like I like attacking pitching on the international market because it's so cheap. Because when you start to agree with these guys, they're so young, you have no clue. Like you can get top pitchers for $350,000, because they don't get the big deals. But I don't think people really understand. Like, I mean, you might give $4 million to a guy, and then by the time he's 16, he's like fat and terrible, and like you basically just you just blew that period, right?
It's a volatile market.
But there's other times where you get Juan Soto, and it's like $800,000. And it's just kind of like you guessed right. So yeah, it's very volatile, which is why you want as many hits as possible. Like they should be adding nothing but shortstops and center fielders every year. Just, you sign a bunch of shortstops and center fielders out of the Dominican and Venezuela for $1 million each. Like I don't mind.
See who makes it.
I don't mind that approach. I don't need the White Sox to sign the $5 million player, but if you have like multiple $1 million additions, fine. I think that's, they just got to add. And I think they will too. I just think it's going to take a little bit of time.
I hope so. Let's get to this drink real quick. Mike Press says, thanks for unblocking me on Saturday night, James.
Yeah, I did. I know.
I love it.
Yeah.
We're mending fences out here with Reggie's.
Well, then there's a Cubs fan at the White Sox event. It was kind of interesting.
We draw all kinds.
Yeah, he said White Sox Twitter's cooler than Cubs Twitter. So, not my words. Those were his. So.
I believe it. I'm sure you're not quoting him there. The White Sox are allegedly building a new Dominican Republic Academy, James. One, should I believe that it's happening? And two, what are the advantages of having a brand spanking new academy in the Dominican Republic?
Well, so I've never been to the old one, but like people that would know have said that it's outdated, which shouldn't be a surprise, I guess, for like anything that the White Sox do. But right. I think people these guys like live at the academy. They take classes there. They take, English classes and schooling and that sort of thing. I think one big advantage is that if they improve it and make it bigger, they could have two teams in the Dominican Republic, which like a lot of teams now do. They have like two teams.
Okay.
Which makes sense because there's like roster limits now. And I don't know what the limit is for this year, but it's like 150 players or something you can have in your system, something like that. Guys that are in the Dominican don't count. So
you could keep people for multiple years. If someone gets there at 16, they're not quite ready to be pushed up yet, but you don't want to get rid of them. If you had extra team, you can hang on to a lot of guys.
Yeah,
okay,
you could just kind of leave them there because as soon as like they come stateside, like the clock starts ticking basically. Like especially now with the roster limits. Like if a guy comes to Arizona and he's like just terrible, well, there's not advanced rookie league anymore. So it's like, well, you're not ready for Kannapolis, and we have these other guys we like better. So they just like cut guys, and they're 17 years old or 18 years old. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of teams have two teams now. The White Sox do not have like the space or the facility to accommodate two teams. So that's one thing. And I think just like modernizing is helpful, right? I bet it's a recruiting tool. I don't know how much it matters. I think these guys generally sign for the most money. And they sign with who, like their agent tells them like, hey, this is the best deal. Sign with this team.
Right.
Like they don't know. I mean, I've heard stories about, guys who the money's similar and they like a certain team's colors, and that's what they decide to do. Like these are children.
They're kids. I was just saying, I kind of get it in a way. I mean, do you think though maybe it could help out with getting relationships with the Buscones? If you've got a brand new facility and you're going to put my kids in there, they might like that a little better. It's got to help a little bit, no?
I do think so. And like listening to David Keller, I don't know if you like, so in the audio, it's not really funny, but I'm laughing. So he was like kind of talking about how they've purchased cameras and they've never had those before. And just like, they bring,
so everyone's out there with their iPhone.
Like they bring the TrackMan out and they stick it like in the field. And they, that's like common, but he's like, we bought video cameras, which the international department didn't have before. I'm like, well, what was Marco Patti like using? Like, maybe he was, remember that Kenny Williams quote, like last year where he said like, I could walk in a room and pick out an all-star, maybe Marco Patti was the same way.
He just felt he was a savant, even though there's no results.
I just, it's like, Kenny, if you like could pick out all-stars, why weren't the teams better?
Right. Just be a little kayfabe. Be honest there. Now, we talked Dominican Republic, but what new or more speculative markets would you like to see the White Sox get involved in? If they're redoing this scouting department, where should they get their foot in deeper? Obviously, the Dominican Republic is the biggest one of the international market. Where would you like to also see them jumping in that you think, maybe it's a little more speculative, but hey, if we get a foothold, this could be a good thing for us?
Well, so I do like they've been pretty good in Venezuela. Apparently, their Venezuelan scouts are like pretty good too. They did just pluck a guy like from the Dodgers. They got the first crack at him and signed him. And who knows if he's any good? Like that Orlando Patino, I think was his name. He was.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
He was part of the fallout for Roki Sasaki. And then the White Sox got the first look at him and they signed him. So they've been good there. I mean, I don't really know that the Dominican Academy matters. Like in Asia, but the White Sox haven't signed like a prospect out of Asia in a very long time. I mean, you've gotten Tadahito Iguchi and you're like veteran type guys like that come over, but they have like no footprint there. So there's that, and then there's even like all these other countries like they rarely get guys out of the Bahamas. They don't get anybody out of Aruba ever. So that, and then I just think like continuing to attack pitching. It's something Houston really did well. Like all those guys that are in
Yes.
Houston's rotation, they all signed for all those guys all signed for nothing. They're
Yeah,
like $200,000, and then they just like turn into what they turn into. Basically.
Yeah, they were cheap older prospects. And I remember hearing Kevin Goldstein talk about the strategy because they're like, no one will go after these type of guys. We would go in there as long as we thought the makeup was good and we can get them to kind of like work as hard as we wanted them to work. They'd sign a bunch of them guys, and they hit on a handful of them, and it became their rotation for those World Series teams. I mean, outside of like when they went out and got a big gun or Verlander or whatever, but Framber Valdez and all them guys were the cheap signing guys.
Well, if you believe in your pitching people, which I think the White Sox do, it makes sense because they're cheaper than everybody else,
right?
On that in that marketplace. So I am curious to see like their next like big signing would be their first big signing because Alejandro Cruz just got $2 million. I mean, that's a pretty big bonus for them for a teenager. And he seems like okay. I'm like I mean he's not their typical big power guy that like he's a good defender at third that is an athlete kind of and we'll see right, but. I mean, like Mike Rodolfo was 1.5 million, like they haven't had like, oh, the White Sox are signing this $4 million Dominican teenager. They've never, ever done it. And, it's because they didn't develop a relationship with that guy's Buscone or agent when they were 14 years old. Right. So is David Keller allowed to do that? They would never answer that question if I asked them. I'm hoping, right? I'm hoping that this was part of like, I call Getz like the Jerry whisperer a little bit because I think it's how he got his job. But, I mean, if he can convince Jerry that this is what we need to do, then maybe like he stops paying attention because there have been some rumblings in the past that Jerry just didn't like it or thought it was ridiculous that you had to offer money to like 14-year-olds. But I mean, it's kind of what everybody else is doing.
I love it. All right, now let's just dream for a second, James.
Yeah.
Because what I want to do is I want to think about what would a good international scouting department look like for the White Sox, both in process and in result. So I'm going to leave it to you. What, for your money, what would this look like 3, 4, 5 years down the road? What starts happening here?
Well, for number one, spend all your money because like it's like
trading it so they can cover Nate Jones's buyout. Like
because it's a finite amount of money. Like that's the thing people don't like. So even in this last period, like they let $700,000 go to waste, right?
Yep.
And what people don't. So even if you told me, oh James, they spent that $700,000 on like whatever, like 6 analytics employees. Okay, great. You could still do that, and you could trade the money to somebody else because then all that does is it gives them the right to spend their own $700,000. Like you're not literally you're not exchanging any money. You're just exchanging the ability to spend that amount of money. That's it.
It's an option. That's it.
Yeah. So it doesn't make any sense. So if you're going to be right around $6 million in bonus pool space, spend your $6 million in bonus pool space. Like there's no reason why. And like part of the strategy, and that was the reason why I'd like be critical of the strategy, right? Because it's like, oh, the White Sox have money left to like trade or whatever. Like the problem isn't that you trade $1 million and you get a Aldrin Bautista. The problem is that you have $1 million still. Like, why do you have this money? Why did you not allocate it to prospects? So I would like more athletes, obviously, right? So more shortstops, more center fielders, but just spend all the money. I think that's a big step one.
I mean, I agree with you, and especially because I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, the Fangraphs guy. So it was Eric Longenhagen, and I think it was when Kylie McDaniel was there. They did a study of all the spending in the international markets, and it was like you get $6 for every dollar you spend in future value for the players. And so not spending the money is wasting way more than just the amount you see there. When they're wasting $1 million, it's like they're wasting $6 or $7 million worth of player value. And to be punting that on a regular basis is insane.
Well, because I think they could reasonably say, oh, there's nobody else to spend this money on and be right.
Yeah.
But that's not the issue.
That's your fault, though. Yeah.
Exactly. You should have had more agreements in place, and then this wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That part has to change. I think it will. I mean, they're talking a good game anyway. As far he seems to understand that it's something that they need to be doing, and he understands that the Dominican's important, and he understands that it's one place where you can get premium upside for really, really cheap. So now they just have to kind of prove it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, I was thinking of this conceptually in a former White Sox player. Now, tell me what you think about this, James. On average, because there could be volatility. I would like one Alejandro De Aza to roll off the shipment and land in Chicago every single year. It could be a lot of volatility around that. Alejandro De Aza for like 3, 4, 5 years was like a 1.5, 2 win player. Decent hit, like league average hitter, enough defense, whatever. Spread that anywhere you want. Or some years maybe it's a 3-win guy, and then it's a couple years you don't get anything. But I basically want Alejandro De Aza to roll off the conveyor belt every single year into Chicago off of this group, because when beginning nothing, if you got either a very good bench player or a light regular every single year, you'd really be cooking with this.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even more so than that, like looking at it as like your future value created component, right? Where it's like the one area where you're not like, if you're good, right, you're picking late in the draft every year. Now, it doesn't matter for the Dodgers; they still take good players. So you have to still take good players. But you could use the international market well, even if you're good again. Yeah. So it's like a great spot where you can just like keep adding to your system. So then if you are winning AL Central titles and you need a middle reliever at the deadline, like you just have an unlimited amount of these guys that you can just trade to get stuff for. Like,
the Padres have been doing that for years and years and years. That's how they have been reseeding this whole time, is trading all those guys.
Yeah, so the Padres are bad at developing players, but they're great at like drafting and identifying players. So then they just trade them all, because they just reload all the time. They draft super young. And they sign the top players in the international market. So you can always trade super young dudes, even if like you struggle to like get them to the big leagues to help you. I mean, if the White Sox have a bunch of like Dominican teenagers that make it stateside that are decent players that you can trade, like I think that's a pretty functional way of doing this. Now they get neither. They don't get anybody to the big leagues, and they have nobody to trade.
That's right. Yeah, big fat zero on all that. James, do you think getting the international scouting side of the business is the most important, kind of highest upside thing that the White Sox could do at this point as far as their org restructure?
So, I mean, I really wanted that, but I think the Ryan Fuller, I'm glad I didn't call him. That's the first time I think I've done this and not called him Kyle Fuller. So I did it right.
You got Bears on the brain. We'll get to the Bears in a minute. Don't worry.
Kyle Fuller, yeah. No, I really think that I thought they needed a hitting guy real bad, and we'll see if he's good. I don't know. Like he's the Brian Bannister equivalent. We'll find out. They went to the right org, Baltimore. Right. There's been no top-down hitting philosophy, which is a huge problem. Right. But if you can get some of these like reclamation projects and all of a sudden you're getting 110 WRC pluses like out of guys like in the big leagues, like, and it's a couple guys a year, that's pretty good.
That's huge. Yeah.
Because I do think they draft, like under Mike Shirley, I think they've drafted pretty well. Now, we're going to find out like as these guys filter up, it's 5 draft classes, it's Garrett Crochet. And then after that, like a lot of those guys should be filtering through. Like I've kind of liked what they've done in the amateur draft. So, yeah, I mean, it probably is the international market just because they're literally getting nothing out of it.
Right. Yeah. They have so much, even just to get like league average would be coming up so damn far. It would be amazing. I mean, I don't disagree. Last White Sox question. I've been asked this all the guests that come on here. How many wins would make this a fun White Sox season for you, James?
I mean, if they win like in the 60s, I think it's going to be pretty interesting, honestly. I mean, they're going to be horrible. Like we know they're going to be horrible. And I've kind of said, like me and Ian have kicked this around. I think I might have told you, I'm fairly certain that we're going to know, like they have some pitchers, like, okay, these couple guys are going to be in the rotation the next time they're pretty good. They need a couple of homegrown position players. So I think like whoever it is, right, you want to feel really good about 2 of like Montgomery, Teal, Caro, because I do think there's a world where, like, if you have 3 guys that you feel like are going to be on your next good team, you can go out and spend some money. Like,
that's a start.
As early as next year or the year after. Like, I think I just used the Jerks and Profar, right? Just signed for 3 years and $39 million. The White Sox are never spending $300 million on a player. But you could sign 3 Jerks and Profars in an offseason,
Right.
Like if you or a couple.
If you got the cheap core and you add those guys around it, there you go.
Yeah, a 5-year, $80 million. You just got to be right on the player, which they haven't, which they weren't ever under Kenny and Rick, right? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, a win total is really hard. I think we'll know like if it's satisfying. And I think obviously like something you were part of the promotional schedule, kind of kind of shows how they think the team is going to be. Like in my opinion, with some of the giveaways, I think
the promotions are bangers.
They're pretty awesome. Yeah, and you really have to lean into the 125 years of White Sox history because, I mean, you can't really have bobbleheads of Andrew Vaughn. So.
Yeah, you don't want people throwing him on the field.
No, I mean, look, they go. I think I heard David Haas say it this morning. They go 62 and 100. They might be the most improved team in the league.
Oh, I'm sure they would be. Yeah,
it's like a 20 win improvement. It's like a 20 win improvement.
Yeah, it would feel a lot better. I know that than watching what we watched last year.
And I think like you were at a lot of those games. Like it's really hard to lose that much. Like you started 3-18 or whatever it was, and then there was
they found incredible ways to lose too. Like they would snatch the losses out of the teeth of victory. I mean, it'd be ridiculous.
Because I don't know that the roster is necessarily better. You just can't lose that much again. Like it's just so hard to do.
I hope you're right.
All right. I'll probably
I have a lot of money on over 49.5, so we at least need to get to 50 wins. That's what we got to get to.
And you have a lot of experience too with this. Like it could always get worse. So
That's true. That's absolutely true. All right, let's get to the Bears coaching search for a second. Before you get out of here, the Bears interviewed 16 or 17 people for that coaching search. Why was the media and Bears fans so upset about this, and why were you fine with this?
I think it's just a matter of like not paying attention to the rest of the league and like so the NFL put these rules in to like slow down these coaching searches because basically like all these guys that were coaching in the playoffs like wouldn't get jobs. Now, one of the issues is the NFL calendar. So the college football like shrine game is this week, and I think the Senior Bowl is next week. So these teams just like want their coaching staffs and scouting staffs in place because God forbid you go down there and scout players like without employees, right? But and regardless of like whether you think that's a thing or what, like they treat it like a thing. Like it's clearly been that. And like just looking back at last year, like the Chargers, I think everybody kind of knew the Chargers were hiring Jim Harbaugh. They interviewed 16 people and then they hired Jim Harbaugh, right? So the league is essentially making you do all these Zoom interviews or whatever, virtual interviews first. You weren't even allowed to interview anybody employed by another team until February 20th. So, like, what are you supposed to do? Like, okay, yeah, have these guys in on Zoom calls and see what they're doing. Like, what do they say about our org? Now, obviously, like, if Ben Johnson chooses the Raiders and you end up hiring Mike Kafka, then, like, I would have looked like a moron defending the Bears. You know what I mean? Like, all your people that are like, oh, they're, they don't know what they're doing, like, would have looked correct. I just kind of felt like, let's wait and see, because like there's nothing they can do anyway. Like it's not like as soon as like it was time to ramp up the search and get serious, like they did, like immediately. Like as soon as I saw the Eddie George thing, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, this is over. And the Rooney Rule is a whole different thing. But it's like, okay, they're ready to make a hire, like in case they can, type of thing. I was fine with it. Like get as many. I mean, isn't this what we wanted the White Sox to do?
Yeah, right. You wanted an exhaustive search where you get intel from everyone, get some brain drain in the process. And it's okay to do a few favors to some people. You never know when you're going to come back and cross somebody again. They're happy that they got that head coaching interview and you can hire them as a coordinator or whatever the fuck. It's crazy.
Tell us why my organization's bad, please.
Exactly. Give us some info here.
Yeah, so I thought it was fine, and then they got the best candidate, and I think I think the one thing, too, is like we're so used to – like, oh, the Bears are terrible and ownership's terrible. And look, like, fine. Like, they've earned that, right?
Yeah.
But did you look at the other 5 openings? Like, I mean, the ownership's terrible there, too. And in tougher divisions, like, in tougher leagues, like, I mean, going to the AFC right now makes no sense. Like, if you don't have an alien quarterback, you can't win.
Yeah,
so good luck to you.
It's incredibly stacked. You're absolutely right. All right, the Bears... they got Ben Johnson. Obviously, they went for the kill. They got him kind of right away and super highly touted, the belle of the ball, if you will, of this head coaching class. Who got the better guy, the Bears of Ben Johnson or the White Sox of Will Venable?
I think the Bears, because it matters more, because it's like you make a bigger impact, Like, I think head coach now in the NFL is more impactful than general manager. And 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have said that. I would have said, oh, you need the players. But, like, I mean, like, you look at the Vikings and the Niners, like, those teams draft like shit. And, like, their offensive coaches are awesome. And they just win 13 games because it's just, like, the thing that matters on Sunday is quarterback and head coach. So if Ben Johnson's good, and usually, like, the top offensive guy in the cycle like this, it's usually pretty good. Like, I think he's going to be pretty good. So probably them. but both teams kind of did something out of the ordinary, right? I think I mentioned this to you.
Shocking.
I mentioned this to you or Chirizi. I don't remember the other night. Like, I mean, when the Sox started their search, like Will Venable was mentioned, and I kind of laughed at it because,
Right.
and I don't know that Will Venable is going to be great, but I know that he's one of these rising star guys that Will Venable is going to be great. Like, I'm like, they're not getting him, and they got him. So, like that's what I mean. Like, whatever this vision is, like Chris Getz has successfully sold it to a lot of like otherwise smart people. So there's like,
certainly looks that way. Yep.
Yeah. So like the Bears and White Sox doing things well, like on the management side is like not something that like I'm used to, but I mean, they probably deserve credit. I think Johnson makes like the bigger immediate impact, for sure. But it sure beats like hiring Phil Nevin, like that would have been like old White Soxy. Like,
that would not have felt anywhere near as good. That's
no.
sure.
And like you want Phil Nevin to like take on the Tony La Russa role and like go hang out in Kannapolis for a week. Like,
cool.
Fine. Knock the socks off. Like, works for me. But at least he's like not the manager.
Absolutely. Let's get to this drink. Pasty Taco says, "Nice one, gentlemen." Thank you, Pasty. Appreciate you. All right, James, thanks for providing your thoughts on the Marco Patti era. New hire, David Keller. What a new and improved White Sox international scouting department would look like, and Ben Johnson. Remember, we ain't trying to be right in the show. We're just trying to understand. You have anything you want to plug before you go?
Yeah, I mean, so February, March, big months for us at Future Sox, just like we're doing all the prospect content. Trying to find Danny Miller, a co-host right now that wants to talk about the White Sox every week. So we're going through.
It was good to see Danny on Saturday night. I hadn't seen him in a long time.
Yeah.
Really good to give him a hug. It was good to see the guy.
We're going through that process. I'm glad I do the minor league show and not the big league show, but I still gotta figure that
Find
out.
someone.
So yeah, we'll have content rolling in. I just did wrote up something on the non-roster invites, and now I'm expecting like 2 a week for the next like 4 weeks probably or whatever.
Nice.
So, we'll just like keep adding guys that you've heard
Refresh
of that
it.
used to be good, more James Karinchaks. So yeah, we're just, and then, me and Ian are live every Sunday night.
Yeah, and I generally tune in every Sunday night, but I was switching back and forth between you guys. I actually had the laptop in the kitchen. During the commercial of the game, I'd run and listen to you guys for like 5 minutes. Then I run back. Oh, it's fourth down. I better get back over here and watch this game. So I got to re-listen to the show. But a good shit always. The Sunday night stream, I always check in at 8 o'clock with you guys, you and Ian.
Yeah, we're getting so many questions now. It's just like programs of the show, so it's great. So thank you for all of the questions. Like, because sometimes we're like, oh man, you got to fill an hour in the off season, like
nothing happened
with just prospect stuff. Right, exactly. And Sox Fest Live helped a little bit, but
James, thanks so much for joining me. Appreciate you.
All right, man. Thank you.
Take care. That was James Fox. That was a great conversation. I love talking about the international markets. Next week's guest. I don't have anyone booked yet, but I'm working on that. In 2 weeks, I will have Courtney Finna come on here. But next week, I'm still working on. Thanks to Punky's Pizza and Pasta and all the 108 families up in the YouTube comments. Appreciate you smashing the like button, comments, of course, drinks and tips. We'll see you on Thursday for the 108 podcast. We're going to talk about the promotion. Mike Downey from the White Sox will be on to talk about Sox Fest Live and some of the promotional items. And then we'll play Smash or Pass at the end about things from each event, from the Sox Fest Live and from our event that we would Smash or Pass. See y'all, and I love you. Bye.